discover the incredible journey of a lonely rancher and a 24-year-old widow, an unexpected love revealed in the midst of grief. Jake stared at the horizon, the amber sun dipping below the endless plains of Montana. At 30, he felt older than his years, burdened by the recent loss of his father and the relentless demands of the ranch. The once vibrant land felt like a ghost of its former self, and he was trapped in a cycle of solitude. Each day blurred into the next, predictable and suffocating, filled with heart-wrenching reminders of what he had lost. Facing corporate giants eager to devour his family's legacy felt impossible when the weight of grief bore down on him, leaving him feeling small and vulnerable. He longed for connection, yet every attempt had been met with unspoken judgment from the townsfolk. He was just a lonely rancher, a target for whispers behind closed doors. It was maddening. The thoughts raced in his mind as he surveyed the fields. Could he protect the legacy his father had built, or would it slip through his fingers like so much dirt? The ache in his chest was a constant reminder not just of his father's absence, but the rift that had widened between him and the world around him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As the days passed, unease settled into his bones like an unwelcome winter chill. He faced another difficult season where the pressures of modern agriculture loomed like a dark cloud. Just the thought of selling the ranch sent him spiraling. What would that mean for his father's memory? For his own sense of self-worth? Jake's thoughts turned on themselves, sharp as barbed wire. He questioned everything. Then came Emily. She moved to town like a shadow on the fringes of his world, wrapped in her own grief. He first encountered her when they crossed paths in the clinic. At 24, her eyes held stories of unspoken pain, and somehow, their silence resonated. Yet, could he truly engage with someone like her? He felt a storm brewing within, filled with conflicting emotions. Was it foolish to hope for a connection, to reach for warmth when his heart was still an open wound? The storm rolled in suddenly, fierce winds rattling the windows of his cabin as he braced himself for a night of chaos. As he moved through the ranch, fighting against the elements, he felt a sense of urgency tighten within him. What if the storm swept away everything he had fought for? The dread twisted in his stomach, paralyzing him. He caught himself questioning whether the connection forming with Emily was a refuge from his loneliness or another chain binding him to heartache. As jealousy, suspicion, and gossip roiled in the town about him working with her, he could almost hear the whispers, the burden of judgment tightening its grip on him like a noose. Just when he thought he could grasp a thread of happiness amidst the chaos, an unexpected revelation about Emily's past loomed ominously overhead, demanding a reckoning. Would he have the strength to confront what might threaten not only his heart, but also the fragile lifeline they had begun to weave together? The answer felt just out of reach, shrouded by the violent storm, as lightning cracked the sky, illuminating shadows of doubt swirling in his mind. The howling wind whipped around the cabin, rattling the shutters as if trying to call attention to the turmoil inside Jake's heart. He found himself pacing, each step a desperate surge against the tempest of emotions raging within him. Grief and longing tangled together with the fears of losing his legacy, leaving his mind in a chaotic whirlwind. What if pursuing a connection with Emily only led him further into darkness? Or worse yet, what if it brought not relief but additional pain? He stopped by the window, peering out into the roaring blackness. The fear of his father's legacy slipping away was eclipsed only by the fear of confronting new feelings. He was faced with a dilemma: allow the potential for love into his scarred life, or maintain the safety of sorrow's familiar embrace. It was unsettling, this push and pull that drew him toward Emily, yet also held him back. The storm's ferocity mirrored the conflict brewing within him. He struggled to think clearly, The idea of vulnerability made him feel raw. But the whisper of his father's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to face challenges head-on. Fear is the enemy of growth, he imagined his father saying. Jake felt an anger rise within him at the thought that his father could no longer offer guidance or encouragement. He was left to confront these feelings solo. Compelled by impulse, he grabbed his jacket and prepared to head out into the tempest. As he opened the door and stepped into the gusting winds, the raw Montana air struck him. The biting cold forced clarity, and he realized that he could no longer afford to dwell in his isolation. He had to see Emily had to confront this connection that seemed both precarious and promising. Racing against the wind, he made his way to her home, heart pounding against his chest like a wild stallion. Memories of their brief encounters played back in his mind. The softness in her eyes, the slight way she smiled when she thought no one was looking. He hoped she might provide the solace he craved, but also feared what unveiling her past would mean for their fragile bond. As he reached her doorstep, the wind howled more violently, an ultimatum of sorts. Should he knock? His heart raced with trepidation. But the thought of her isolated from the storm, potentially facing her darkness alone, ignited a flicker of resolve inside him. He raised his hand and knocked, the sound swallowed by the storm. A quiet moment passed, stretching an eternity, as Jake wrestled with the choice he was making. Finally, the door creaked open. Emily stood there, surprise evident on her face, and suddenly, the storm faded into the background. Jake's mind raced. Her expression spoke volumes. Did she know? Was she as terrified of the connection as he was? He took a breath, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders, ready to confront the unseen burdens they both carried. It was a moment where vulnerability could lead to either a beautiful partnership or a devastating confrontation. Emily, he began, voice barely audible above the wind's fury. We need to talk, he said, every letter punctuated with unease and anticipation, the outcome hanging at the precipice of their uncertainties. The stakes had risen. The path ahead could either pave the way for healing or shatter what little solace he had found. And as he stepped inside, he felt the tension wrap around him like the storm outside, raw, intimate, and a harbinger of change. Would they emerge as allies in grief, or would the weight of their shadows render them forever apart? Jake stepped inside, shaking off the cold as Emily closed the door behind him, sealing out the tempest that had raged outside. They stood together, the air thick with unspoken words and simmering tension. Her eyes, wide and searching, held a flicker of something: curiosity, fear, hope. He couldn't tell, but he sensed she was grappling with questions just as fierce as his own. Jake, what is going on? She asked, her voice steady yet soft, anchoring him momentarily in the storm of his thoughts. He took a moment to compose himself. The familiar sorrow weighed heavily on his heart, but it was now intertwined with the urgency of the moment, the need to unravel the complexity of their emotions. I've been thinking a lot about us, he managed, the words spilling out with uneven breath. About how we lost so much and how it feels like we're both holding onto our past instead of moving forward. A fleeting shadow crossed Emily's face. It was subtle, but he recognized the struggle she faced. You think we could just move on? Forget everything? Her voice rose slightly, a fervent edge lacing her inquiry. No, I don't want to forget, he said, regretting his wording but knowing the importance of addressing the overwhelming trauma between them. But what if we chose to face it together? Not as broken people, but as two who might help each other heal? Her expression softened, but the confusion lingered in her gaze. What does that even mean, Jake? Can we rebuild anything, or are we just conjuring a fantasy? Jake felt a pang of desperation. He was drawing closer to clarity, yet feared it might be just out of reach. You're right. It might feel like a fantasy, but I've seen glimpses of more. The way you smile when you think no one else looking, the warmth in your laughter. There's something beautiful in you that shines through the heartbreak. His words felt raw, and he wasn't too sure if he was treading too far or too close. I want to believe that, Emily responded quietly, her vulnerability laid bare. But the past, what if it's too heavy to carry? The question settled in the space between them, heavy and ominous. Jake took a step forward, a fierce determination swelling within him. Then we learn to share the load, he suggested, his voice laced with conviction. I can't promise it will be easy, but if we face our fears together, we might find something worth holding on to. For the first time that evening, a flicker of hope ignited in her eyes, but along with it came uncertainty. What if I'm not ready? What if I pull you down with me? Then we pull each other up, Jake insisted, daring to reach out and grasp her hand, their fingers intertwining despite both of their fears. Emily held his gaze, searching for courage within herself. What if this leads us both to places we're not ready to explore? In that moment, Jake recognized a stark truth. He would rather confront the unknown with her than remain paralyzed by the shadows of their pasts. Then let us step into the unknown together, he proposed, regret and fear matching the resolve. Because standing still isn't living. As those words hung in the air, a sudden crack of thunder rumbled in the distance, mirroring the tumult of feelings swirling within them. Would they have the courage to face the storm together? Jake could sense it was just the beginning of a battle neither had fully signed up for. It was a challenge, one that would redefine their connection. Just then, a gust of wind rattled the window panes, as if to echo the urgency of their conversation. Jake tightened his grip on Emily's hand, ready for whatever awaited them. He felt their futures were entwined at this moment, drawing them closer even amid insecurities. Deep within, the need to confront not just their shared past, but also their personal demons surged. The question lingered in both their minds: could they emerge from the storm as stronger individuals? The resolve to take that step together now enveloped them, but both knew the path ahead would be fraught with revelations. What's going to happen next? He asked quietly, as apprehension and hope danced between them. Emily took a deep breath, and the answer could shape everything. But before she spoke, the air grew still, hinting that their intertwining journeys were only just beginning. Jake felt the weight of the moment pressing on him, a palpable mix of uncertainty and determination ricocheting in his chest. He searched Emily's eyes for reassurance, but found only a reflection of his own fears, mirrored and magnified. It was as though they were two ships sailing in a fog, desperately seeking their way forward while fearing the very depths of the ocean below. We need to start somewhere, he said, willing the tremor from his voice. It could be small, just a step into honesty. Emily seemed to consider this, her brow furrowing, but then a flicker of understanding sparked in her expression. What if being honest means revealing things we're not ready to hear? She hesitated, clearly grappling with a weight she had carried for far too long. Then that's exactly what we need, Jake replied, his resolve strengthening. We can't unpack our bags if we don't even acknowledge the baggage we're carrying. This was more than just a conversation. It felt like a launch pad into uncharted territory, a line in the sand between their pasts and the new path they could forge together. Uncertainty coursed through him like a live wire as he recalled the scars they both bore. He couldn't hide from his own history, the mistakes and losses, their shadows lingering. But he also recognized that healing required vulnerability. Okay, I'll go first, he said, the words spilling out of him with a sudden urgency. I still think about that night, the accident. I replay it over and over in my mind, wondering if I could have done anything to save them. I feel like I've been living in a guilt-ridden loop. Emily's face softened. You love them, she offered, her voice kind but firm. It's only natural to feel that way. I thought I could protect them. He continued, fighting against the tide of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Instead, I abandoned them. It felt like a confession that tore at his insides, but by whispering it aloud, he felt a little of the burden lift. As silence fell, he realized he had bared a piece of himself, a piece intended for another soul, yet it felt less weighty than it had before. Emily nodded slowly, her eyes glittering with empathy. I understand more than you know. I lost my husband when I was still trying to understand what it meant to be an adult. The loneliness was suffocating, but it's because of that loss I've learned pain can be a teacher. Her admission struck a chord, amplifying the gravity of their exchange. Jake realized they had begun chiseling away at something profound, seeking to expose the tender places hiding beneath their defenses. But what if pain becomes the only thing we know? She added, the fear creeping back in her voice, like a ghost at the edge of her spirit. Then we changed the narrative, he said defiantly, an ember of resolve igniting within him. Pain doesn't have to be our only teacher. It could be the catalyst for our growth. Something palpable shifted in the air between them, a resonance of their desires to emerge from the rubble of their pasts. Yet with that shift also came the realization that the exploration of their truths would be fraught with risks. The night wore on, the storm outside slowly abating, mirroring their internal battle. Emily's eyes were piercing as they met his, as if challenging him to continue uncovering their emotions, to delve deeper into shadows they had not yet illuminated. "Are you willing to face it, Jake?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "All of it." His breath hitched at the question, but he nodded firmly. "If it means a chance for us, yes. I'm ready." As those words hung in the charged air, a sense of urgency gripped his heart. They stood on the precipice of personal discovery, aware that they faced not just one another, but the jagged shards of their pasts. Little did Jake know, their willingness to confront these shadows would reveal more than they could have ever anticipated. A shift was in the air, a whisper of change, and he sensed they were both on the brink of diving into the deep end together. What if that change leads us to the truth? We've been afraid to confront? He asked, the weight of his own question pressing down like a dire omen. Emily's eyes, wide with both fear and hope, reflected the uncertainty that still loomed. Would they find healing, or would they unearth wounds that could tear their fragile bond apart? The storm within and without had only begun its crescendo. The silence throbbed in the aftermath of Jake's question, stretching between them like the vast expanse of the ocean outside. He could feel the crash and retreat of waves mirroring the tumult within him. He had taken a tentative step forward, but the uncertainty loomed larger than ever, shadowing their shared moment of fragile hope. Leaning against the wall, Jake sought a way to diffuse the tension. "Let us do this," he said, more to himself than to Emily. "Let us confront what's hidden in plain sight." He watched her, and for the first time, he saw the flicker of resolve mirrored in her eyes. The storm might have calmed outside, but inside, he felt a tempest brewing. He sensed the weight of their shared truths gnawing at the edges of their conversation, desperate for release. "Okay," Emily said finally, her voice steady but her gaze intense. "What is the worst thing you feel about yourself?" Her question cut through the air, raw and unadulterated. It took Jake a moment to find his voice again, each heartbeat pulsating louder than the last. The answer was lodged deep, intertwined with fear and shame, a shadow he had avoided for too long. "I feel so weak," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I think I've moved on, something pulls me back. It feels like I'm stumbling through a fog that never lifts." Emily nodded, her understanding palpable. "And that weakness makes you feel inadequate, right? Like you're not enough?" "Exactly." The word emerged with a clarity that shocked him, as if admitting it aloud somehow softened its edge. "I've always prided myself on being strong for everyone else, but I never learned how to be strong for myself." Emily's expression shifted, revealing layers of empathy and courage. "I think we build these fortresses to keep ourselves safe, but they end up trapping us. What if we learn to dismantle them together?" Her statement hung in the air, sparking something within Jake. Could this be the foundation not only of their healing, but of a new way forward? He gripped the edge of the table, feeling both excited and terrified by the prospect. "So we face our vulnerabilities head-on," he ventured, contemplating the balance between fear and empowerment. "But how do we begin?" "We share the moments we don't want to relive, the ones that haunt us," Emily replied. "It might hurt, but I think it'll lead us to something real." Jake took a deep breath, nodding as determination surged through him. "Okay, I'll share my next piece." He could see the flickering candlelight dance off her features as he gathered his thoughts. "My father, he expected me to be the one to fix everything after the accident. I was supposed to be this rock, but instead, I felt like I was crumbling. The truth poured out as if the dam had finally broken. I spent all my energy trying to be perfect for him, to fulfill an ideal. I never realized I was just as lost as he was. Her eyes widened, absorbing his words, giving him space to unearth emotions that had sat stagnant for too long. It's confusing, feeling lost when you're trying to play the part of the guide. Isn't it? Emily said, her voice soothing yet firm. It's paralyzing, Jake responded, a knot of tension tightening in his chest. How can I lead anyone when I can't even lead myself? You start with vulnerability, she suggested, her voice gaining strength. It's the first step to understanding who we really are. Yet uncertainty lingered, like dark clouds on the horizon, threatening to dampen their resolve. Could vulnerability truly lead to strength? The thought both terrified and intrigued him. A trickle of resolve seeped into his heart. Perhaps confronting their darkest histories would finally allow them to step into the light. In this moment of shared understanding, the storm outside receded completely, leaving only the sound of their breaths mingling in the empty space. Jake felt a subtle shift, as though they were both facing an open door, and despite the fear of what lay beyond, they had already committed to stepping through. Together, he breathed, the word bursting forth like a promise. Emily nodded, her eyes gleaming like distant stars. Together. Yet even as they embraced their newfound courage, an unsettling thought crept into Jake's mind. What if their pursuit of honesty unleashed truths that they weren't prepared to face? The weight of possibilities weighed heavily as he realized they were on the brink of far deeper revelations. As the night wore on, Jake couldn't shake the idea that some shadows were still lurking, ready to reveal themselves at the worst possible moment. Would their burgeoning connection withstand exposure to the raw truth of their selves? The question gnawed at him, an ache echoing through the solemn air, leaving Jake tethered between faith and doubt. What awaited them once they fully unveiled the secrets they both guarded so closely? Jake felt a charged silence enveloping them, pressing on his chest like a physical weight. A part of him longed to take that step forward into vulnerability, but another part quivered at the thought of what awaited the very essence of himself, emptied and laid bare. Could he bear the scrutiny of honesty, not just from Emily, but from himself? Emily broke the silence with a gentle nudge. You spoke about your father. What did you feel when he expected you to be his rock? The remembrance sparked a cascade of emotions. It was a suffocating pressure, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck, as if seeking to ease that old, lingering tension. I felt like I had to hold everything together, and if I faltered, his voice trailed off, heavy with the unvoiced fears. He was terrified of disappointing not only his father, but everyone around him who had ever counted on him. The irony was that while he focused on being strong for others, he lost sight of what it meant to be true to himself. The recoil in his gut formed a knot of shame. You were just a kid, Jake, Emily interjected softly, extending her own vulnerability. You weren't meant to shoulder the weight of the world. But I wanted to, he shot back, frustration creeping into his tone. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could save us all. Instead, I just crumbled. She observed him, her gaze intense, as if peeling back the layers of his soul. This is the first time you've acknowledged that. Isn't it? Jake felt the acknowledgement resonate within him, causing him to reconsider his concept of strength. It feels weak to admit that I couldn't save anyone, especially him. Strength doesn't lie in perfection. She countered, her voice steady yet nurturing. It's about the willingness to show up as you are, even if that means facing failure. Her words pulled at something within him, a shift in perspective that felt both daunting and liberating. Those moments of feeling weak didn't define him. They were part of the pathway towards self-acceptance he had long evaded. What should I do with this? Jake said, looking at her with a mixture of hope and trepidation. For now, she replied thoughtfully, start by letting go of the guilt. Remember the moments you felt trapped. Write about them. Share them with me when you're ready. We'll take this journey slowly together. The idea of transcribing his vulnerability felt monumental. Jake had always been able to articulate his thoughts easily when they involved others or work, but expressing his inner turmoil on paper, that felt like exposing skin to sharp edges. Okay, I'll do it, he resolved. But I'm afraid. What if these words lead to a truth I can't handle? Emily leaned forward, her eyes glimmering with determination. Then we'll face it together. You're not alone in this. Jake inhaled deeply, contemplating her offer. In the flickering candlelight, he was ready to dissolve the fortress within. Rather than succumb to the fear of revealing his imperfections, he could transform them into a canvas to illuminate his path to healing. Minutes stretched on, filled with their exchanged glances, and he felt a bond forming that transcended the mere act of sharing burdens. It felt like a partnership forged through honesty. As the night deepened, Jake felt an urgency within him, a contemplative fire igniting the dormant ambitions he had tucked aside. What if writing could not only bring about understanding, but also power? Perhaps he was more than just a reflection of expectations. He could be the architect of his own narrative. In a world where he had always played a role, he was ready to rewrite his script. But before he could articulate this nascent vision, a thought pierced the tranquility. What would happen when he dared to confront his most deeply buried fears? Would it unravel the tentative connection they had built, or could it fortify it, leading them into uncharted territories? As the first glimmers of dawn broke through the window, Jake felt the heady thrill of possibility wash over him, but also the chill of the unknown that still lurked in the corners of his mind. Would confronting the past lead to liberation or devastation? The decision loomed before him like a sunrise on the horizon, beautiful, yet irrevocably transformative. The day unfolded like a fresh chapter in a book, yet Jake remained anchored in the echoes of his past. The sunlight streamed into his small apartment, illuminating the cluttered desk where he would attempt to encapsulate his most private thoughts. Sitting before a blank notebook, he felt a flurry of emotions whirl within him. He flipped the first page nervously, uncertainty coursing through him like electric current. Each line offered him a chance to release the weight he had carried for far too long. Still, he hesitated, paralyzed by the fear that lurked in every unformed thought. Would it truly provide clarity, or would it plunge him deeper into despair? With a deep breath, Jake picked up the pen. The metal felt cool against his fingertips. He began to write. The words were clumsy at first, a disjointed expression of his feelings, but as he surrendered to the process, they began to flow. A narrative took shape. Childhood memories, moments of perceived failure, the unrelenting urge to be an anchor rather than a ship. Each word became a release, each sentence a step toward confronting the truth he had been too terrified to face. He wrote of the unyielding expectations placed upon him like a mantle too heavy to bear, reflecting on how those burdens shaped his identity. It was exhilarating yet terrifying. With each line he penned, the image of his past crystallized, unflinching and raw. Jake was not only taking an examination of his life, but stripping away layers of self-deception. As he transcribed his vulnerabilities, the inklings of self-awareness started transforming into a profound realization. To confront his past was not merely an act of reflection. It was a tool for forging his future. The guilt he thought was inescapable began to dissipate, replaced by a budding sense of autonomy. The act of writing became a mirror, revealing competencies hidden beneath his doubt. He was not just a caretaker. He was a creator, a thinker, even a healer. Jake paused, letting the weight of these thoughts linger. Realizing he could redefine his narrative, he felt emboldened. There was something liberating about voicing his fears, the acknowledgement that he had been stifling his own aspirations for the sake of others' expectations. What if he could transform that pressure into motivation? As afternoon turned to evening, he found himself in a rhythm. Ideas cascaded as he penned memories that once felt shrouded in darkness. But then he paused, hovering over a pivotal moment the day he felt he had disappointed his father the most. That singular event echoed in him. and with it came an urgency to explore how it shaped his present interactions, especially with Emily. The phone chimed, breaking his concentration. It was a message from Emily, asking about his writing progress and reminding him they would meet later that evening. An unfamiliar heat rushed through him, a blend of excitement and fear. This wasn't just about sharing his words. It was about vulnerability. Would she see him differently once he revealed the depths of his consciousness? Would honesty solidify the connection they had cultivated or fracture it? Jake pressed on, capturing the essence of his fears and revelations. This was the real unraveling, the confrontation of his past intertwining with his present, a tapestry of lessons only he could weave. As he prepared to wrap up for the night, he questioned a looming dilemma. How far should he push into this journey of exploration? Would unveiling these layers force him down a path he wasn't ready to traverse? The evening light faded, yet rather than feel diminished, he sensed a burgeoning strength. He could envision where this writing could lead him, the potential of real transformation glimmering just out of reach. But with that thought came a new fear. What if revisiting these shadows stirred emotions too daunting to handle? Jake left the last page blank, a promise to himself to fill it when he was ready. The pen hovered above the paper, vibrating with possibility. The journey was just beginning, but with uncertainty came in exhilarating energy. As dread mingled with anticipation, he settled back in his chair, wondering if the cage he'd built for himself was about to collapse under the weight of his truths. The clock ticked into the night, and Jake felt a hidden part of him yearning to confront whatever lay beyond the familiar darkness of his past. Would he ultimately find liberation or remain tethered to the very fears he was trying to escape? The sound of the clock ticking was the only thing that filled the silence of Jake's apartment. It punctuated the gravity of his thoughts, echoing his indecision as night enveloped him. Memories danced just beyond the reach of his pen, and he fought the impulse to replace the ink with fear. Would sharing these vulnerabilities with Emily fracture their delicate bond? Or would it deepen the connection they had begun to forge? The ever-present hunger for clarity gnawed at him. He envisioned Emily's reaction, the way her eyes lit up when she had enthusiasm for his writing. If he could give her a glimpse into his soul, could it bring understanding? Maybe it would answer the questions she didn't know to ask about him. Yet the specter of his past loomed menacingly, whispering loaded doubts into his ears. Gripping the pen with renewed resolve, Jake decided that the time had come to confront the pivotal moment he had skirted around. He needed to navigate through the haze of disappointment that still clung tightly to his heart. Words began to flow again, this time with intensity fueled by a combination of trepidation and determination. He reflected on the day he felt his father's disappointment crash like a wave against him, a memory anchored by regret and shame. It was a torrent of emotion he had previously tried to evade. The ramifications of that moment festered within him, dictating behaviors and interactions, especially with Emily. Was he subconsciously reflecting his father's fears and expectations onto her? It was a realization that made him squirm. The thought that he might encase his own self-imposed limitations around someone extraordinary felt both burdensome and liberating. Jake's fingers flew across the pages. He let his subconscious guide him through the tangled emotions, the resentment that had grown from feeling inadequate, the relentless need for validation, and the crippling fear of being unworthy. Each written line was a brick pulled from a flimsy wall, exposing himself in a way that felt both terrifying and invigorating. As he delved deeper, it became clear that this conversation with himself was not just about the past. It became a manifesto, a declaration of how he would approach his future. He began to articulate aspirations that had lain dormant, buried under the weight of expectations. Perhaps it was time to reclaim his voice, not only for his own sake, but for the connections he yearned to build and fortify. The cathartic experience illuminated paths he had never considered before, beckoning him towards self-discovery. He took a moment to breathe, the reality of the situation washing over him. The journey wasn't merely about purging memories. It was about owning them. The discomfort was palpable, yet there was a glimmering thread of hope laced through the dark fabric of his introspection. His fragility wouldn't be a hindrance, but a gateway to connection. Closing his notebook with a flourish, Jake felt lighter, a sense of empowerment bubbling within. The blank pages no longer seemed daunting. Instead, they were filled with potential moments yet to be explored, adventures yet to be embraced. With the evening waning, he felt the weight of his decision settling in. It was time to share this growth, to present his true self to Emily. The fear lingered, but now it propelled him forward rather than holding him back. He could continue fabricating a facade, or he could risk his heart in search of authenticity. Just as he prepared to message her, the screen flickered to life, a notification illuminating the dim room. It was an incoming call from Emily. The ringing echoed through his mind like a clarion call. Jake hesitated, heart racing. In that moment, uncertainty clashed with determination. Truth stared him down, demanding he confront it head-on. What revelations awaited him in this conversation, and could he muster the courage to let her in fully? Jake's heart raced as he pressed the button to accept the call, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The voice on the other end was familiar, yet each syllable felt like a tightrope strung between hope and fear. "Hey, Jake, I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Emily's cheerful tone broke through his cloud of anxiety. The warmth in her voice sent a wave of affection through him, yet a pang of unease followed closely. They had discussed many things, but this felt different, the air heavy with unspoken truths. "Not all. Just thinking," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "What's up?" There was a beat of silence, and Jake could almost hear her smile. "I've been reflecting on some of our conversations, and I wanted to check in with you. You seem more pensive lately. Is everything okay?" The corners of Jake's mouth twitched, an instinctive urge to deflect emerging. But that would be the easy route, wouldn't it? The very opposite of what he had just resolved to embrace. "Yeah, actually, I've been doing some thinking about where I want to go with my writing and with everything else, really." Emily's interest peaked. "That's great. You mentioned that you wanted to write more personal stuff, right? What is holding you back?" Her question landed like a stone in a still pond, rippling outward. It forced acknowledgement of the layers of fear still tightly laced around his heart. "I guess I'm scared. Scared of the judgment, scared it won't be good enough. You know my history with," he paused, "my dad. It's tough, I understand. But your voice matters. You have so much to say," Emily encouraged gently. Jake felt the warmth of her support wrapping around him, but the familiar shadows crept back in. The memories of past failure surfaced, but he pushed them down. "You don't understand. He was never satisfied, and I was always trying to prove myself. That fear, it still holds me back. I worry that I'm driving the same expectations onto you, too." The directness of his admission hung in the air, pulsing with vulnerability. A moment passed before Emily replied, her voice calm yet firm. "That's not something you should carry alone. If it feels like a burden with me, you should tell me." Jake closed his eyes, digesting her words. For a moment, he felt liberated, yet the fear of what was unsaid pressed heavily in his chest. Could he let her into that space? "What if I fail?" He blurted out, half a question, half a plea. "Then you fail, Jake. But I don't think you will. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy," she said softly. "And I'll be here to help you through it. Just promise me you'll keep sharing your thoughts." A surge of emotion swelled within him. Emily's persistence was a lifeline against his self-doubt, an extension of hope that pierced through the layers of his past. For the first time, he considered taking her at her word, stepping closer to authenticity. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I'll try." As they continued talking, a flicker of determination began to spark, igniting a desire to embrace not just writing, but life itself in all its imperfect glory. A shift was occurring deep within him. Jacob, the hesitant writer, started to evolve into someone willing to expose his shortcomings, to confront his failures in the light of relationship, rather than allow them to remain buried fears. When the call ended, Jake leaned back in his chair, heart racing with newfound clarity. He had taken the first step, But a profound question resonated in his mind. How far from everything he had once feared would he be willing to step? The following morning, he woke earlier than usual, eager to pursue the day. Outside, dawn broke in brilliant hues, inviting him to explore. Ideas danced like butterflies. Was it finally time to wield his pen, not as a sword against vulnerability, but as a bridge to connection? He made his way to the local cafe, with a smell of brewing coffee mingled with the whispers of fellow patrons. It felt as if the world had shifted overnight. Inspiration pulsated through him. He would write, and in that writing, share more than just words. But as he pulled out his laptop, a flash of doubt swept through him. What if, amidst his eagerness, he revealed too much? The prospect of sharing his innermost thoughts filled him with apprehension. Could he balance authenticity with the fear of exposure? Determined, he opened a document, fingers hovering over the keys. This was more than just writing. It was a reawakening of purpose, yet uncertainty knitted itself into every thought. Would he manage to push through the discomfort presenting itself at the brink of his rebirth? Resolute yet hesitant, Jake took a deep breath. The time had come for him to truly share his voice. But could he harness the chaos of his feelings and turn them into something beautiful, something entwined with the core of who he was? He stared at the screen, tension coiling within his mind, pondering where this new path would lead him. As the cursor blinked tauntingly, Jake knew the moment of truth about his past, present, and future was looming just around the corner. Where would this journey of boldness and vulnerability ultimately take him? Jake sat in the small cafe, surrounded by the familiar hum of life, awakening to a new day. The sun poured through the windows, spilling warmth across the table, illuminating the blank page before him. As he gazed at the cursor blinking steadily on the screen, he felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension gnawing at his insides. Today will be different. Today, he would embrace the weight of his truth and let his words fly. He recalled Emily's unwavering support during their late-night conversations, how she had inspired him to confront the very essence of himself and shed the burdens that had stifled him for so long. The decision to share his story was not merely about writing, it was about stepping into his own light, breaking free from the expectations that had bound him for years. He was no longer just the lonely rancher. He was a man ready to forge a vibrant narrative dedicated to growth and self-acceptance. Inhaling deeply, Jake placed his fingers on the keyboard. The words began to flow, surging forth with a vitality he had long forgotten. He captured his memories, weaving stories of grief, loss, and ultimately triumph. Every keystroke was a cathartic release. The echo of guilt that had haunted him was now transformed into a proclamation of resilience. He wrote of his father, the pedestal he had placed him upon, and the painful awareness that he had been striving for approval instead of understanding his own worth. In that moment of reflection, Jake realized that he had not only been shackled by his father's expectations, but had also inadvertently cast them onto Emily. The recognition was accompanied by a pang of sorrow, but it simmered beneath a burgeoning sense of clarity. Pain can be a teacher. He recalled Emily's words, feeling them resonate in his heart. He had spent years grappling with the effects of his past, but it was in this act of honesty that he finally began to transform his pain into purpose. As he looked around the cafe, he saw the faces of strangers, each living their own unique stories, and he felt a profound connection begin to form, one that transcended grief and loneliness. He acknowledged how sharing his struggles could pave the way for authenticity. He wasn't merely aiming to heal himself. He was destined to empower others who felt equally ensnared by their narratives. Jake paused, contemplating the profound shift within him. In reclaiming his voice, he no longer viewed himself as a victim of circumstance. He had acquired tools that would enable him to build a life he truly cherished. He envisioned taking Emily's hand as they navigated the depths of their souls together. Together this time, he would not hold back. Instead, he would engage with life, embracing vulnerability. The noise of the cafe softened as Jake penned the final lines. He wrote of hope and renewal, a promise to himself to continue the journey ahead with openness and honesty. By surrendering to his vulnerabilities, he would allow connection to flourish not just with Emily, but with himself. As he hit save, a sense of fulfillment washed over him. He had captured not just words on a page, but a testament to his evolution. For the first time in years, Jake felt a solid confidence rising within him, fortified by the authenticity of his experience. He was no longer a lonely rancher. He was a storyteller, equipped with a voice that held the power to inspire. Eager to share his journey, he hurriedly drafted a message to Emily, inviting her to meet. The excitement coursing through him felt electric, a mixture of exhilaration and a hint of vulnerability. Yet he welcomed this embrace. Jake stood tall as he left the cafe, a smile breaking across his face. The Montana air felt fresh against his skin, filled with the possibility of new beginnings. He could finally envision a future shaped by his aspirations and formed through the relationships he sought to cultivate. He had confronted his past, dismantled the weight of expectation, and emerged transformed. In doing so, he emerged ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, resolute in the knowledge that he had the strength to face the storms to come. As he stepped onto the sunlit streets, he wasn't just wandering anymore, he was forging his path forward. The legacy his father had left behind would no longer burden him. Instead, it would breathe life into a new legacy of his own, characterized by courage, connection, and unyielding growth. Jake arrived at their meeting place, heart racing with the thrill of possibility. Today was the day he would not only reclaim his voice, but also share the gifts of vulnerability and authenticity with the person who had begun to illuminate the darkness in his life. The journey of self-discovery had rooted him firmly in the present, allowing him to become not just the rancher he had been, but the man he was meant to be. His story was just beginning, and he was ready to embrace the adventure fully, authentically, and with unwavering conviction. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your heart. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help spread these transformative narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Jake's incredible journey, because your voice matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Don't wait. Even one more second your support could change someone's life.